So for my landscape picture, I decided to do the picture I took on my first big trip, which was Vegas. I think this is like a year ago before Corona happened, so it was safe and it was like a good time. Um, I really liked this picture and this trip because it was the first official adult trip I took by myself and with friends. And just the whole planning was done on my own, which made it feel like an adult. It was awesome. So the ideas that I took off of this was cardinality, compensation, making tens, hierarchical inclusion, adding on, adding up, one-to-one correspondence, subitizing, and relationship between addition and subtraction. So for cardinality, in the preschool I used to work at, or currently work at, children are always using colorful bears, colorful blocks, counting animals, and these are great tools for them to learn how to count in a group, or how to count numbers within a group. And I think this is a great tool for children because it's fun and it's like working their fine motor skills while still teaching them math skills. I remember struggling counting when I was younger, and my teacher thankfully noticed that I was struggling and always had me working with the counting bears during center times. Um, she would have different colored bears all bundled up together, and she would ask me to group them however I liked, but I would have to count them as I grouped them. And I remember the grouping, the red bears and the blue bears, and then counting how many bears were within that group, and that seemed to really help me. The next one, compensation. I used compensation a lot when trying to figure out how much I've been spending in the store on my trip to Vegas. I would restructure the numbers to make it easier to add up, and that would be very helpful. I also used compensation a lot growing up. I would take my parents' change when I was younger and figure out how much I needed in order to make $1. I would always get the quarters and the nickels, the bigger change, and then I would figure out which of these amounts makes $1, so I could go to the store and get a candy bar all by myself. That was a great way I figured out how to count. The next one is making tens. At my Vegas trip, I would make tens in order to figure out the cost of my items. At this one store, I saw a couple mugs that I wanted, and they were $9.99 each. I ended up picking 5 out that I wanted, and in order to make it easier for me to figure out how much they would be, I rounded the $9.99 up to 10, which would make it a lot easier. 10 times 5, 50. It was $50 for all 5 mugs that I wanted. And I did that a lot throughout my trip because it was just easier to round up and then figure out how much it would cost that way. The next idea on my landscape would be hierarchical inclusion. And this was expenses and how to keep track of how much I am spending on my trip. That was a great way for me to keep track of how much I was spending. As a child, I would get a weekly allowance from my parents. It was only $5 a week, but as a child, that was a lot of money. I would try to save my money and only spend it on things that I really wanted. This one weekend, I decided I wanted to use my saved up money to buy a new dress for my doll. We went to the store and I picked out the dress that I wanted. And when we came out to check out, I was able to check up on my own, and it came out to $20 and a bit of change or so. I gave them $25 and she gave me my change. And I remember when we walked back to the car, I was in the car and I counted the change to make sure it was the correct amount because I was very, I wanted to make sure all my change was there because I wanted to make sure I had everything. The next idea on my landscape would be adding on and adding up. Adding up was used when I was figuring out how much I spent. I remember the last night at my Vegas trip, I was adding up how much total I had spent on my 3-day trip. I think the total was a bit over 300, and since it was my big trip alone, I thought that was a good amount spent for the days I was there. I think it was so important to me because I wanted this big trip to be special and very money well spent. The next idea to my landscape would be one-to-one correspondence. I remember in my elementary school we were learning to play Duck Duck Goose, and the way the teacher taught us was by counting instead of saying duck. I remember counting each friend in the circle and matching them with their corresponding number. I would go like, let's say, 1, 2, 3, 4, goose. And I vividly remember this from my childhood because it was a great way and great learning tool that the teacher used to entertain us while also teaching us our numbers. The next idea would be subitizing, and that's the idea of instantly recognizing the amount of something in a group. I saw this a lot in the preschool I work at, when the children approach the building blocks or the counting animals and can figure out how many of each item there is. Because the blocks are so big, you can see from a far distance that there's only 3 red and 2 blue, and so it's easy for them to instantly learn how many of a number it is. The last strategy in my landscape would be relationship between addition and subtraction. When using the counting bears one day with a child at the preschool, I asked the child to count the red bears only. We formed a group of red bears and counted up to 10. I then asked, so how many would we have if I took away 4 bears? And I proceeded to take away 4 bears. Well, the child regrouped the rest of the bears and was able to count that there were 6 bears left. And the child proudly answered 6 bears. And that was a great way for the child to understand what happens when you take away and add up bears. And this is my landscape. Thank you.